Is that 212, or is that, I'm sorry, 666 is Kilgore. 666 is Kilgore. They've written this at the top of it, so it's 666 is Kilgore. That's a recorded vote, so we need a motion in a second. 666.
Need to strike.
Need a number to strike. All in favor? Vote on board. All right. Close the roll. Ayes have it, 6-0. All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, since we have Mr. Finch here, we might communicate to the clerk's office never to issue that bill number in the future.
We have to take care of it.
You don't have to worry about it next year.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, moving on. I know Delegate Garrett, you have somewhere you need to be, so we're going to take your work. We also have a similar bill that Delegate Tran has, I believe. We may want to hear both of those, one after the other.
Surely, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, you have before you House Bill 1277, 1277, and this is a continuation of work that the General Assembly began last year, and it's affectionately called the clipboard issue. So for 25 years as a physician, whenever any patient came to me, they would get the clipboard, the proverbial clipboard, and they have to now fill in their name and address and their health data and everything else that's already been collated by their primary care doctor that referred them to me. And if I do a great job, that data is complete, but if not, there is loss of information and challenges that we have in collating that data. So last year, as you all recall, we had House Bill 2457, which basically allowed just within the Secretary of Health and Human Resources, this is work that former Secretary Bill Hazel has been working for a number of years, he would be able to capture data from his 12 different agencies to be able to realize efficiencies and improve access to services for those folks. And just as a point of reference, and very important, in 2016, the HHR Secretariat reported that Virginia had 2.67 million people enrolled in either Medicaid, SNAP, TANF, Family Services, or Child Protective Services. And after removing all the duplicates and the matched up, 35% of the folks that we serve in these public programs today are enrolled in 2 or more of those programs. And all that data is all duplicated and differently generated within those different silos. 10% of those folks showed up in at least 3 or more of those programs. And clearly, these programs shouldn't be operating independently of each other. The benefit of the state's intervention in these individuals' well-being is to be maximized. Another piece of data, the governor's children's cabinet reported that just within their purview, just dealing with children in the Commonwealth of Virginia, it crosses 4 secretariats, 17 agencies, and 152 funding streams that we're trying to somehow get our arms around and make that work more efficiently. So one of the recommendations that Dr. Bill Hazel, again, with his task force has been working on for the last several years, is to figure out a way that we can take those silos and somehow be able to gather information efficiently yet safely from across that. The operative, that's why the bill, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the operative words in here are in lines 30, 39 through 40. The problem is this antiquated data from mid-1970s. In the mid-1970s, they said if you generate any data, it has to be used for the purpose in which it was generated. And that was interpreted if you went to Medicaid and qualified for services, but those folks would also identify you might qualify for other social services, TANF, SNAP, Children's Protective Services, Family Services. They could not use and share that data. And then the real operative section is line 74 to 81. What we're trying to do is to further delineate what the proper purpose of safely and efficiently sharing that data across these various different silos would be. So in a nutshell, Mr. Chairman, that's basically what the bill does. We're trying to take the state of Virginia with all the very different agencies from a program-centric posture to a client-centric process. And I think at the end of the day, we'll enhance transparency within our government. I think this will streamline a lot of our processes. It's going to make it a lot more efficient and effective. It's also going to minimize the challenges for our folks that are really trying to seek those services. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know of no opposition to this. I've heard from Northern Virginia Tech Council folks. They've been in support of it. So that's the bill, basically, sir.
Thank you, Delegate Garrett. Do we have any questions from actually, so government efficiency bill, I would just be curious in tracking this with the cost savings to the Commonwealth over a period of time. I mean, we're streamlining the agencies, improving access to those folks in need of those services. So thank you for bringing the bill. I do know that Delegate Tran has, what's that, they're trying to get her here? Okay. What's that? We have a quorum. We were just gonna hear that at this time. I know you have somewhere you need to be, so, at this time, we can take action on the bill.
Commissioner report.
We have a motion properly seconded. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't get through the process. It's first committee meeting, have to get back in gear. Do we have anyone speaking in favor of the bill? Or in opposition of the bill? Now a motion is in.
Motion report.
Motion and properly seconded. All right, everyone vote on the board. Everyone votes, cares, voted. Close the roll. House Bill 1277 reports 7-0.
I thank the chairman of the committee.
Thank you.
Do I need to be at the full general laws? I don't know how you work, Delegate Pete, sir. Mr. Chairman,
We can handle it.
Mr. Chairman, it is my maiden voyage as well, so we're hoping that the uncontested subcommittee bills would be presented in a block, and if there is an objection to any of those, to remove them from the block. For further discussion, we don't want to hear them twice necessarily. We certainly would contact your office and work through your office, make sure you were there in that circumstance.
I thank the consideration of the chairman. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, moving forward. All right, we have Delegate Delaney. Welcome.
Hello.
This first bill, or have you had some others?
Second bill.
Second bill.
So hopefully the first one that we'll see passed on to the full committee. I will say that I do have someone here to testify with the bill who was walking over from Main Street. I know there was some not clarity on the exact start time of the meeting. So if things time out, I can present my piece, and if he appears at the end, then I can turn it on over.
All right, floor is yours. Welcome.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm here today to talk about HB 727, and this is a bill that amends Virginia Code by deleting the language that is 49 CFR Part 659 and simply replacing it with the phrase Federal Transit Administration statutes governing the Commonwealth. So Federal Transit Administration statutes governing the Commonwealth designated rail fixed guideway state safety oversight agency. So this modification makes the conformity of state code not specific to federal code, but rather the large Federal Transit Administration statutes. So HB 727 does not expand nor contract DRPT's FOIA exemption in its role as a rail fixed guideway system state safety oversight agency. In 2016, the Federal Transit Administration issued a new final rule for state safety oversight of rail fixed guideway public transportation systems not regulated by the Federal Railroad Administration. This final rule replaces the previous state safety oversight rule 49 CFR 659, which is the old rule, which will be rescinded in April 2019. So this bill simply reflects the change. It is supported by DRPT, and I do know that someone from that agency should be here shortly if you do have any technical questions, but it really is a pretty simple language change that makes it such that when languages change on the federal level that we don't need to come back and change it every time, that we're simply stating the accurate language in the code.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions from the committee at this time? Now this seems to be technical. I would like to hear from some folks.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure if Alan from FOIA, I did see you in the back. If I could ask you a question. Those questions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So thank-
Alan Gerhardt of the FOIA Council.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gerard, we're all here looking at the bill, believing that it's a technical update rather than a substantial broadening of the FOIA exemption. Is that also your understanding?
That is my understanding, yes.
And some issues related to homeland security when we passed Senate Bill 645 in 2016. You may not be familiar with those issues, but related to that.
My
Is this
understanding,
bill related to that?
this bill is separate. I mean, this is an existing exemption that's been around for a while. That my understanding is simply the federal government plans to change which CFR code it's gonna be. So this is not meant to be substantive. It's merely technical change.
And final question on that, I know from when I was on the Court of Justice Committee, we had Delegate Griffith and others who would admonish us for codifying federal statute references as well as regs. What do we do generally as a matter of course when those references change, as they may?
I think it varies. Some like this will make a reference that's a little bit broader. This is still limited clearly to the Federal Transit Administration regulations, so it's not incorporating any different federal law there. It would be broader in the sense that it would allow them to use different numbers. So I think depending on how specific it is, how often changes are made, they may adopt something where they actually wait till the federal government makes the change and then change the number itself, but then that leads to the problem every time the federal government changes, we have to have corresponding
Mr.
legislation.
Chairman, we often have to react to what the federal government does, but I think, Mr. Chairman, as a member, as a matter of course for your subcommittee, we want to be sure that we're narrowly tailoring these types of bills going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate Pease.
Get some folks here that's going to speak to Bill.
All right, any more questions from the committee at this time? Anyone to speak in favor of the bill? Or in opposition to the bill?
Oh, in favor of the bill.
Oh, favor of the bill, welcome.
Just in the nick of time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, the question on the bill?
Just speaking to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an agency bill. It does not substantively change the FOIA exemption that the RTT already has for state safety oversight. It simply simplifies the federal code reference for existing federal code in changing federal code in 2019.
Okay, thanks, sir. Move to the committee.
Move to report.
Second.
We have a motion to report properly seconded. All right. On the board. All right. Bill reports 7 to 1.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the committee.
Oh, 7 to, oh, I had a one.
One absent.
So,
Absent.
I had a one nay.
7 to 1.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
All right, thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the
All
committee.
right, Delegate Wright, I know you're in a major rush.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
My
indeed.
bill is 212, and I think there's a friendly amendment.
Yes, sir. Clerk, do you have an amendment? In proper form?
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes, sir.
I gave the handwritten amendment to council right before.
Okay.
I think she would read it. It incorporates the provisions of the bill that was stricken with House Bill 212 without changing what Delegate Wright was hoping to do, simply adding Planning District 1 and keeping the rest the same. Clarifying school board, school district or school boards governing school divisions, adding Planning District 1 and what we've got here.
Correct. Did you need to read the amendment, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on line 45, after district, insert or board that governs a local school division. On line 46, after district, insert 1 comma. And on line 46, after stricken and, strike or
properly second. All in favor, say aye. Motion's, the amended bill is before us. Delegate Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this bill does, it excludes, Planning District One, as amended, and Buckingham, Cumberland, and Lunenburg County School Districts from the prohibition against hiring under certain circumstances a school division employee who is related to a member of the school board. And of course, there's no new ground we're plowing. This is just adding these school districts to the current ones that are exempted. I'll be glad to answer any questions and hope that you would move the report.
Thank you. Fairly self-explanatory. Any questions for
Sure.
Delegate Wright?
Sure. I would ask the patriot, I mean, why do we even have an exclusion that's not broad? Why do we have one has the different districts in there to begin with?
That's a good question. I think that may be a bill.
I should get my own deal.
Well, you said that, I did.
It just seems like to me, if it's good enough for these districts, shouldn't it be good enough for all of Virginia?
I would think so, except I think maybe each locality may want to vote on it. Each school board, some may not want it. That's the only thing I would say.
Yeah.
In the 14th planning district I represent, all of my district does not include the entire 14th planning district. So I just got, the counties have asked me to put it in. I presented it on their behalf. This resolution is from them.
Okay.
But you make a good point.
All right. Any further questions from the committee? Anyone speak in favor of the bill? Or in opposition to the bill? Oh, yes, sir.
Jeremy Bennett with the
Over
Virginia
here.
School Boards Association. We just wanted to voice our support for this bill.
Thank you. And I think if I may speak to the bill as well, in some of the smaller rural localities in my area, we have counties with, 6,000 people, and half of the county, it's 5 or 6 names, so you have a lot of folks that end up, they're related to everyone else. I mean, that's just the way it is in these smaller localities. So I think you're trying to fix a problem in the rural areas.
Well, the main problem is the shortage of teachers. They can't afford to lose a single teacher.
Any further discussion? Any action from the committee?
Move to report.
We have a motion to report, properly seconded. All those in favor, please cast your vote. For and opposition. All right. Everyone who cares to vote, voted. Close the roll. Passes 8-0. Thank you, Delegate Wright.
Thank you.
All right, Delegate Tran. We called you, 1329.
So excited. Good afternoon.
You are, is this your first bill?
It is.
Oh, my
All right. I'm ready though.
All right, welcome.
Esteemed members of the committee, before you is House Bill 1329, what I affectionately refer to as the Religious Identity Protection Act. The ability to worship freely without fear of persecution is a core tenet of the founding of our country, and Virginia has a very special place in this chapter of our history. The Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom was enacted into law in 1786. The statute guaranteed freedom of religion to people of all faiths. At that time in our history, Baptists were persecuted and rightfully needed protection. The statute was a precursor to the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, which gives us our freedom to worship. As Virginians, we are proud of the role we have in ensuring religious liberty in our country. And as you know, this statute is the only document enshrined on the walls of our beloved House chamber. We must protect every Virginian's ability to freely worship without fear of alienation and persecution. And further, our religious identity and affiliation is private information that should not ever be used against us. Currently, state agencies, localities, and other entities are generally unable to collect data on religious identity, except for institutions of higher education, correctional facilities, and behavioral health or mental health institutions. In some instances, this is important data to collect and share. For example, a student applying to a university may want to acknowledge their religious belief in their application and consent for that information to be shared because they want to be considered for scholarships or other types of programs. However, there's nothing in the code that specifies that the university or other agencies in the Commonwealth cannot be compelled to share this data with the federal government when asked for the purposes of creating a list, registry, or database. History has witnessed wars and atrocities that result from religious persecution, often starting with identification of individuals who practice a certain faith. Our goal is to preserve religious liberty and to ensure that this personal data is not used as a tool for persecution. HB 1329 would amend the Virginia Code to ensure that data collected regarding the religious affiliation of Virginians is not used to create a federal list, registry, or database based on faith, national origin, or ethnicity, that you could not share that data with the federal government. My constituents and community organizations like the Family Foundation, the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, the All Dulles Area Muslim Society, the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington, and others support this legislation, and many of them are actually here this afternoon to make comments in support of this bill. Across the board, Virginians see the need to strongly affirm the freedom to follow one's faith and to protect our personal information from being used to alienate, prejudice, or persecute. I hope it will be the will of this body to favorably act upon this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very passionate. Do we have any questions from the committee at this time? Delegate Bauer.
Delegate Tran, you mentioned some of our agencies that apparently have some of this information, which I wasn't aware of. Can you repeat which agencies do have religious information?
Sure. So let me just clarify. Our code is actually really, I think, cutting edge. We don't allow, generally speaking, the ability to collect religious data. However, in certain instances, there are exceptions. So that's higher education institutions, the criminal justice system, and I believe behavioral health and mental health institutions are the different parts of the code that allow for the collection. So when those entities collect that data, it's, I think, not required. It's not mandated, so it's optional. And also, they can only share or disseminate that data with the consent of the individuals who are providing it or for their authorized person.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee this time? Let me ask you this. As far as the federal authorities requesting information at this time, what are we seeing in Virginia regarding the federal authorities?
That's an excellent question. So I think, I don't know of any specific federal requests for this information. However, we have heard consistent conversations in our national dialogue about the need to create, for example, a Muslim registry. And so this would help us be in good standing and in a good position if that request were to come down, that we're protecting the religious liberty of Virginians.
Okay, thank you. All right, any further questions from the committee? All right, those from the audience. Delegate Mears.
Just for clarification, and sorry, this is just a wordsmithing question, but applies even if consent is given to disseminate such information to public institutions and include juvenile correctional facilities. So just so I know exactly what this bill does, so if consent is actually given to provide the information, this prohibition still stands, or am I misreading this right?
So if consent is given to disseminate religious identity, this prohibition would still stand. And I just want to clarify, sometimes you give consent to share your information at the outset without fully understanding what are all the different ways that data could be shared. So if, for example, if I just use the university metaphor that I was talking about earlier, when you're applying, you might be like, oh, I want to share this. I think I might be eligible for a scholarship or a program. I want to show my diversity so that I could, enhance the diversity of a campus, all different reasons, right? But you might not foretell that this would be one of the ways that the data could be shared. And if you know later on, you might not want to. So you get into a lot of complications in terms of when
you know, how would a university, in this example, be able to go back and ask you, you know, do you want to share this because we're being asked? You know, universities, I love universities, but like they may have data based on people who apply to the school. Do they keep the data for after you graduated? So like it gets very complicated. And I think at the crux of the matter though is the belief that we want to protect people's religious freedom and that we should be able to freely worship without fear of persecution, that information that we provide in good faith that'll be used for purposes related to the reason we're providing it is not then used when the federal government steps in for this, the creation of a registry or database.
So your worry is an example of federal agents under an investigation ask for a database. This is your hypothetical. I'm trying to get at what you're concerned about. Federal agents go to a state college and ask for a list of everybody from Ireland. Is that kind of what you're concerned
From
about?
Ireland?
Well, just say, name
Yep,
the
yep, yep.
country, Iran, okay? And that's your concern, is that this would prohibit the universities from turning over that information or even collecting it. Would they collect it but not be able to disseminate it? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
The institution can still collect, but not disseminate it to the federal government if the federal government was to create a federal registry based on this information. Like a federal registry of individuals based on this information.
Based on individuals.
Yep. It's individual data. So clearly the sharing of aggregate data to show that we are a diverse Commonwealth is still allowed, and you know, if that takes place now, it's still okay, would be okay under the statute. It's for the very specific creation of a registry.
Okay. Delegate Fowler.
Make sure I understand this, now, they could request information on just lots of things, but they just cannot request religious information, is that correct?
It's a special word.
They could not create concerning the religious preferences and affiliations of the students in order to create a database that's based on religion, national origin, or ethnicity. We know that sometimes religious identity is a precursor to creating and collecting information that's larger than that, but that the database is based on those other factors.
Any further questions? Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm reminded of the saying, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And, you know, I represent a district where we have the birthplace of religious freedom in America, Old Green Church, where Patrick Henry was brought by his mother, who was a Presbyterian dissenter from the state Anglican Church, and was inspired by Samuel Davies, who later became the president of what was then the College of New Jersey, Princeton University. So I'm very sympathetic to what you're trying to do. I think my concern about the way it's drafted right now is that, as you correctly mentioned, that intent, existing law is fairly progressive. That existing law is fairly progressive in the sense that it collects no personal information concerning the political or religious beliefs, affiliations, and activities of data subjects. The new language proposed omits the phraseology of the existing law concerning religious beliefs. It simply goes to preference. And I'm not sure if we reference religious beliefs as preferences in any other area, or affiliations is maintained consistent in the construction of the bill that you have drafted. And then in line 51, it goes back to affiliation, but simply omits religious beliefs and activities. So in terms of construction, I want to make sure that we would be doing it the way the law is, based on what you've already said, that the law is good the way it is now. We're not collecting that information, and it's fairly progressive in nature, which I think is a good thing for Virginia, the birthplace of religious freedom. So really, so that was a kind of a comment, really, more than a question, but it may be something that you'll need to work on with staff to kind of get it all in shape, if you will.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
Mr.
Thank you for those,
Thank you for this
that
conversation.
feedback.
Delegate Huff.
To help Chairman Peace, Uber Chairman Peace, I mean, is he proposing a line amendment that would remove that word preferences and, that's line 50? And you remove preferences and, so it is consistent?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm just making an observation.
Oh.
Thank you, Delegate.
I'm sorry.
Hope and peace.
Right, that's right. Back me up, brother.
I like that.
Any further questions or comments? All right, let's.
I'm just wondering how this would affect our requirement to collect census data.
That is an excellent question. So census data is collected through the federal government. I believe that the U.S. Department of Commerce is responsible for the census. They could continue to do that. The census then hires organizers to come out and door knock and collect that data and report it directly back. So that would not go through kind of like the state, these entities or the state to collect that data. So the census can continue to operate. It's a very important data set.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman. So if the federal government's already collecting the data, I don't know why, and they have it at their disposal, why we will prevent the state from cooperating with that. And then number two, and my lawyers can help me with this. You know, if the federal government wants it, the federal government wants it and asks for it, you know, any law or regulation that passes can preempt this statute.
Well, just, okay. Thank you for that. I'll save my comments. All right, any further questions from the committee? All right, let's get some folks those to speak for the bill.
Do I sit down?
You're welcome to stand right there. We're just looking for folks to speak in favor of the bill, if you have any folks here. State your name and why you're for the bill. Welcome.
Good afternoon, members of the subcommittee. I'm Lana Hastings Martinez. I work for the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. And today happens to be our Legislative Advocacy Day, so we met with many of you. Thank you for sharing your time with our members and supporters from all over the state. In fact, we had about 500 people attend today, and they represent over 3 dozen different faith traditions. And everyone is in favor of Delegate Tran's bill. There's a lot of concern, as she stated, it's a very narrow bill. It doesn't prevent the sharing of data, you know, open-ended, but it's specifically for a registry that may be created by the federal government. And that's something that a lot of our folks are scared of. So we would just ask the committee to look favorably on the bill and set Virginians' minds at ease. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Amy Perrin-Seibert on behalf of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. We support the bill and hope that you will support it as well. I think we share a special history with experiences that we had certainly in Europe in World War II when there were registries created for people's religious denominations, and something that we don't want ever to happen here again. So I think while we know this is sort of a forward-looking bill to prepare us for something like that, we want to make sure that doesn't ever happen here. So we would appreciate the support of the bill. Thank you.
Hello, peace be with you. Thank you so much for your dedication and public service. Thank you, Delegate Tran, for your dedication. My name is Rizwan Jaka. I am a board member of the All Dulles Area Muslim Society, the Adams Center. We're the largest mosque in Virginia, 25,000 Muslims in our community, 11 branches and satellites, and we work very closely with people of all faiths and backgrounds. We're here today with the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. Our mosque shares locations with 2 synagogues, and as well as with the church. We work very closely with all denominations, all faith backgrounds, and obviously, you know, the discussion about the national registry of, you know, Muslims and all that stuff obviously is contrary to American values and contrary to the Constitution. And you know, is it rhetoric or is it real? But it obviously creates fear, uncertainty, and you know, intimidation. And obviously, we know what you know, horrific acts occurred, you know, as far as the internment of the Japanese Americans, you know, during World War II. So we know that there's a slippery slope that can happen. And so we would urge, you know, you all to really, you know, we support this bill that Delegate Tran has proposed to make sure that Virginia does not cooperate with any type of registry of religious or ethnic or any specific profiling, you know, if, let's say, the federal government did ask for that type of information. And members of the Jewish community and Christian community have said that they would be the first ones to sign up on any registry if something came up on that aspect, and we appreciate that partnership. Let's stand up for American values, constitutional values. We support the Constitution, and we hope everyone supports the U.S. Constitution and the Virginia Constitution. Thank you so much. Peace be with you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else speak in favor? All right, do we have any folks here speaking against the bill?
Mr. Chairman, just a brief comment. So, I very much appreciate what you're attempting to do. When there are challenges with the construction of the bill, it's not quite ready for prime time, as they say. There are ways to keep the concept moving through the process and to continue to look at the issue to get it better and to make it right. It's a very important subject. We want to do the right thing. I said there's nothing to fear but fear yourself earlier. I'm reminded of another saying, oh, you have little faith. I mean, we are not Nazi Germany. And I appreciate people's concerns in that regard, but we are still a pluralistic society of many faiths, and that's what makes this country great. And so I hope we can all kind of embrace that concept rather than the glass half full concepts that we are sliding to a place that does not embrace those qualities. Because I imagine that there's some people that come from our area that would say, we need to do something similar to this for the Second Amendment rights that we have when you're trying to look at registries, attempts to make registries for gun ownership. So I think there are a lot of issues here that you bring that are very good, that are based on our shared values, but I think we probably need to continue to look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bella?
Yes, again, I want to support this bill. I want to vote in favor of this bill. Again, I'm with you on the religious component. And again, that's a fundamental right that this country is founded upon, and that is nobody's business. But your national origin, I mean, that's not nobody can help where they're born. It's just from there. Ethnicity, which is kind of a similar thing, but that's not a protected fundamental First Amendment right. I mean, it's a religion. I think this is too broad. I think if it was narrowed somewhat, just to speak to your religious beliefs, I would support the bill. So
Thank you, Mr. Bella. Delegate Harris, did you?
I guess, bringing a little bit of the courts of justice logic, which is covered by antidote, covered by what may happen is what the law is. It sounds to me like this bill is trying to be, I applaud the idea of being proactive, but it seems to be at the end of the day trying to correct a problem that has not happened yet at the federal level. I personally don't think it will happen. But, so that's probably the concern that raises for me is we're trying to solve a problem that we're thinking may happen someday down the road, maybe, but hasn't happened yet. And that's, I don't know if that's the best attitude to have on passing bills and passing laws.
Well, thank you, Delegate Harrison. Speaking to the bill myself, where do we draw that line based on our fears to pass legislation? I agree with the concept, but where do we actually draw the line based on those fears of the unknown passing these laws and what we fear might happen at the federal level? So do we have any further discussion on the bill?
First question, are you using the request to speak button, Mr. Chairman?
I like the old fashioned way.
I'll do it that way.
Intercom system.
Okay. I would align my comments with Delegate Fowler's that I like the concept, but I do have some reservations about unintended consequences and the language, and I would ask the Uber chair whether or not he would be able to send this to the FOIA council to look at and make recommendations.
Typically, the way that's done is by letter of the chairman, and the bill would be laid on the table or PBI'd, and then the letter later would come.
And sorry, could you just explain what happens when it goes to the FOIA council?
There's a Freedom of Information
Yep.
Act, FOIA Council,
Yep.
and this committee, there's a letter from the chairman, the committee makes a recommendation, the chairman writes the letter, then the FOIA Council takes this issue and it goes through the process, and they scrutinize the concept and send that back to the General Assembly.
Okay.
as a recommendation.
So I found your comments to be really helpful. I think that there are some times when we hear real potential things that are taking place at the national level and how that informs our governance. And I think you've heard from members of the community representing very diverse faiths that the fear of persecution is very real in the Commonwealth. And that clearly the way the code is written already takes into account some of the need to preserve religious liberty. Otherwise the code wouldn't, very narrowly allowing when and where that data can be collected and how it can be disseminated. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to help to refine those protections that are already in our code. I hear you, Uber Chairman, about making sure that the language is aligned with the, kind of subsection 10, making sure that it's aligned. So that would be in line 50, and then like subsequent iterations where the statement is made, it would be, the religious beliefs, affiliations, and activities to align that with the language that's already existing in the code. On the point of national origin and ethnicity, I think we have seen very real examples of how the desire to keep out folks of a certain religion, of Muslims, have then led to couching that in terms of national origin and ethnicity. And also for people of the Jewish faith, which my husband and kids are, sometimes it's a faith issue and sometimes it is an ethnic issue too. And so I just raise that for you to think about in terms of the intent of the scope of this language and not for it to be anything beyond that. But I think that there are some complicating and sensitive factors when we look at religion and how it ties to some of these other aspects of our lives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, committee.
Move to report.
Second.
We have a motion to report and properly seconded. All right. All in favor? Cast the roll.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend to your earlier point about sending the letter to the FOIA council. I don't know if FOIA is the most appropriate place to put this, but if you think that it is, I do think she's touched on an issue that sharing this information to the feds, I think that we should try to restrain that, and I think she's pointed some good issues here, so that if in your opinion, you believe that the FOIA council is the best place to put this, I certainly would appreciate the chair's.
So, Mr. Chairman, Delegate Hope, we will try to identify the best place. The FOIA council is what came to mind first in terms of a remedy, to resolve these unresolved matters that are present today. So we'll work with the patron and see what we can identify.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Delegate Hope.
Thank you for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Delegate Golova. Thank you. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is House Bill 1426. Not as exciting or interesting as we just heard.
We'll be the judge of that.
Trust me, if I can make it as exciting as that one, I'm probably doing something wrong. Mr. Chairman, what House Bill 1426 does, it adds the College of William and Mary to a long-standing exemption in the Freedom of Information Act regarding proprietary investment strategies. And so this is an exemption that already exists for the Virginia Retirement System, the Virginia College Savings Plan, and the Board of Visitors of the University of Virginia. The language is exactly the same all the way back to 2004, but the concepts go back longer before that. And so the reason why the General Assembly granted this exclusion in FOIA is because most money managers won't accept public funds because they're fearful that their internal strategies and decisions on investments can be disclosed under FOIA. You might be asking yourself, why on earth is the Board of Visitors of University of Virginia included in all that? And the reason is that they actually manage a fund that is different from their foundation, it's different from their operating costs, but these are gifts that are actually provided and managed by the Board of Visitors of the University of Virginia. There is only one other university in Virginia that has a similar situation, and that's the College of William and Mary. And so that's the genesis of this, is to allow William and Mary to manage its funds in a similar manner to the University of Virginia. The net effect is they'll be able to maximize the amount of investment that they get off of those. It's important to note that the exemption doesn't change the fact that these are public funds. It's only affects the ability for somebody to be able to get under FOIA the strategic investment decisions. Everything on the outside, so the amount of funds invested, the actual performance of those funds, that's all still open for public investigation. I do have a representative from William and Mary who can get into any of the details if you want. I did talk with Megan Ryan to ask what their permission or their position was, and she went, it's basically her way of saying they have no position, which in my mind is a great victory indeed.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. Any discussions from the committee? I'm going to line it up a little bit with some amendments that you know. Just right out. All right. Any questions from the committee? All right. None at this time. Speak in favor of the bill. And then you had some folks. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Colin Skowinski from William and Mary. Very pleased for the help on this bill. We do appreciate the support on this one. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Anyone speak in opposition to the bill? Committee?
Move the report.
Second. We have a motion properly seconded. All in favor? Cast your vote. All eight of us. Close the roll. 1426 passes 8-0.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you. And you don't need to be involved.
I'll be there anyways.
Okay, that's right. Okay, thank you. All right, where are we here? Delegate Wild, front side. House Bill 940, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this goes on the Christmas tree as delegates' first speech in front of subcommittee, so let's do a shimmy and set the thing on the road. All right, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I come before you today to present House Bill 940, a bill to create a Freedom of Information Act ombudsman in the Attorney General's office, whose job is to expedite FOIA requests made to state agencies, not hinder our constituents' access to information. I have a letter from the Maryland-Delaware District of Columbia Press Association. I've got copies for each of you if I may give it to the clerk at this time. Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's happening right now is we don't have a dedicated department within the Attorney General's office whose sole responsibility is dealing with FOIA requests. This is a problem because the Attorney General's Compliance and Transparency Office has two other core responsibilities of managing outside counsel contracts and statements of economic interest, as well as handling FOIA cases within the office itself. We've also found out most people don't even know that the Compliance and Transparency Office exists, let alone that it has since 2014. Meanwhile, the FOIA Advisory Council performs yeoman's work in handling more than 1,000 FOIA cases a year, as well as dealing with issues from this committee, but it has no mediation authority. This is a problem for our constituents because the burden of handling FOIA requests by non-dedicated staff creates a burden of productivity and efficiency within the Attorney General's Compliance Office, while the all-volunteer FOIA Advisory Council only meets once a quarter at best. Our constituents need their government to be simple, streamlined, and efficient. The FOIA Ombudsman achieves that goal by dedicated attorneys solely to handling FOIA issues for constituents and state agencies alike. It's a one-stop shop for everything FOIA, so FOIA compliance officers within state agencies, as well as our constituents, don't have to spend time navigating the system. They'll know exactly where to go. Meanwhile, state agencies would have attorney-client privilege by working with the attorneys within the Ombudsman's office to seek their advice for redactions, exclusions, and delivering on the request in a timely manner. We have existing precedent for this working in Maryland, which in 2015 passed a law setting up a Public Information Act ombudsman within their own Attorney General's office. In fact, the Maryland Ombudsman told me herself about 20% of her workload is just helping people who filed a FOIA request and didn't hear back or didn't receive everything they requested. There is nothing Maryland does that Virginia can't do better. I think we can all agree on that part at least. And transparency and open government are no exception. If you have any questions, we're joined by Brittany Anderson from the Attorney General's Office and Alan Gerhardt from the FOIA Advisory Council today. And with that and the permission of the chair, if you'd like to, feel free to ask me any questions. And I also have Betsy Edwards from the Virginia Press Association who's here to speak in favor of the bill. Thank you.
Delegate. Do we have any questions from the committee at this time? Delegate Bell.
Delegate Roan, see you put in a budget amendment?
Yes, I have. And for that, regarding the budget amendment, with that, the original, document that we actually put in with this, we estimated it to be about $200,000, and we had figured about 2 full-time staff attorneys. That's what basically the fiscal impact statement that came back. If we want to, knock this up to appropriations, I'd be happy to, deal with, finding a happy medium with them, so that one, we're actually making sure that we are fully staffing this office so we can, perform the job duty to the best of its ability, while at the same time being as fiscally responsible as we can with the taxpayers' money.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee?
You mentioned that someone is here from the FOIA Advisory Council?
Yes.
I'd like to actually ask about the process if
Yeah.
you would mind.
Welcome, Alan.
Thank you. Alan Gerhardt, Executive Director of the FOIA Council.
Sir, so the question I have is, what is the process of setting this up? And then, does the Attorney General already have the opportunity, the ability to create this inside of his department if he so desires, within the budget that he's been given?
I think I might have to defer to the Attorney General's representative for that, because we're part of legislative services, so we're set up as a legislative agency. We've traditionally had actually we're budgeted for a staff of 1.5, so we operate very differently, I think, with the proposal today.
Wonderful, okay, I appreciate that. Chairman, if you would mind if you come from the AG's office.
Sure. We have a representative from the Attorney General's office that can answer that question.
Her name is Brittany Anderson. Is she here today?
Don't see that.
Well, yeah. Do you know offhand, so, do you know the process of that, we would go through to set this up, and whether the Attorney General today can go ahead and create this division if they so desire within the confines of the monies allocated?
So I know that within the existing Attorney General's budget, obviously there's no existing line item for this, and that everything dealing with FOIA within the budget for the Attorney General's office is going completely into the Compliance and Transparency Office. And the issue with that is they've already got 2 other core responsibilities that they're already fulfilling within that office, and then FOIA is a side note to that. And so what this basically does is this gives us full-time staff attorneys who work 8 to 5, Monday to Friday, every day dealing with these FOIA requests. And, there's the public perception that this is a reporter's thing, and I'm a reporter, so obviously I care. But at the same time, this is about our constituents, and our constituents, making sure that they have that access to information. And to me, and I know the chairman has, spoken a lot about transparency over the years especially, that this is really about making sure that the most number of people have the most access to the most amount of information. Our tax dollars have already paid for this information. This is the public's information, and we should do absolutely our best job streamlining that process to the people so that they can get their documents when they ask for it, instead of basically being told to come back another time, not having their FOIA request fulfilled, getting a certain amount of information but not enough. This sets up that precedent so that we can get this done. And yeah, I'd be happy to entertain any more questions. Yeah.
Any further questions from the committee? Delegate Mears.
Is there concern that the budget amendments for $245,000, impact statements for $810,000, and is there a concern that we are not, that your budget amendment doesn't give that department the money they need to fulfill its?
Right. So basically, we would have to. That would go up to the appropriations committee. Is going to have to basically figure out how much it is that they need with that. But when we had originally figured this out, just having talked with the Maryland Ombudsman, I spoke to her personally. We were looking at 2 attorneys plus 2 staff. This then boosted that up, and I believe they boosted up the level of pay grade that the attorney would work with. But I think that, to be honest with you, if I can just have a chance to hash out that detail within appropriations, I'd be absolutely happy to do that. I mean, so this is basically my way of saying I'm not wed to the number of people and the amount of money that we have to have for this, but at the same time, I want to make sure that when we are working together, within the agencies and we're working together with appropriation staff, that we're finding that happy medium, between using the taxpayer dollars wisely and getting the exact result that it is we want from it. I've also just received a memo here saying that Brittany Anderson from the AG's office is on her way, so she'll be able to deal with that in a second. Mr. Chairman, if you would like, if it's your will, we can certainly turn over to some other advocates who are here speaking in favor of the bill.
There may be further questions if
Yes.
they're on their way, maybe further discussion. I guess my question, we already have, the FOIA council, we have Mr. Gerhardt, we have, local attorneys, localities, we have this network of things that are already out there. And then we have this huge budget amendment that really doesn't match up with your request either,
So basically what that does is, when we're talking about within the state agencies itself, this consolidates that. In Maryland's case, the FOIA ombudsman over there has dealt with 114 state agencies in its first year of operations alone between 2016 and 2017. So we already know that here in Virginia, though, with the number of state agencies that we have, that we should be able to have a much more consolidated one-stop shop when we're talking about FOIA. I've realized that the numbers that we had worked up in our office regarding the budget amendment versus the fiscal impact statement that came back for us, obviously they didn't hit on the same number, but at the same time, there's certainly a level of flexibility that we could use in setting up the office and then improving it as time goes on, or just basically taking any feedback that we have here from the committee and bringing it to a pros and saying like, hey, this is going to be the best way for us to get this going.
thank you. Delegate Hope.
Thank you, Delegate Rome. I think this is an excellent idea, and I would certainly support the bill. And even if you don't get the funding, I think it's the job of the legislature to tell the Attorney General what we want to see funded. And so even if we don't have the money available, that we have it in the code, and then if we don't get the appropriate funds, maybe they can do it within existing resources, or maybe to your earlier point, they don't fund it at this high capacity initially until we get the thing going. So is that something that we could do? That we could approve the policy, and if the funding's not there, that the office could still exist in the code? Because it's the legislature's intent. We tell the Attorney General what we would like to see. If we put this in the code, that's our prerogative as the legislature.
Yes. That is, yes, I would absolutely support that.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think if Delegate Hope believes that we could tell the Attorney General all these things we could do, I can come up with a list for him that might not be funded either. But just a couple of questions.
Sure.
One, when the Attorney General delegate, when the Attorney General representative comes, will they be able to represent that this is an agency bill for the Attorney
No,
General?
this is my own bill.
This is your bill?
Yeah, I drafted it.
And just a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman. So is the administration taking a position
No.
on it? Okay.
No, this is not an administration bill.
Okay, and does Maryland have a independent legislative council like what we've got?
Yeah, so they have what's called what they used to have is, or right now they still do, it's their compliancy council, but basically the compliancy council versus the ombudsman work in two different ways. The compliancy council can actually issue binding opinions, whereas the Maryland ombudsman, she doesn't have decisional authority as much as she functions as a troubleshooter. And what we're looking for here is that troubleshooting immediate capacity in order to get the job done.
Thank you, Delegate.
And I
Mr.
believe,
Chairman, so it's an advisory role, is that?
Right, it's an advisory role that works in a different function than what the FOIA Advisory Council does.
And if you rely on the advice, I think we have another bill, Delegate Mullen, is there any immunities, are there any protections
So, right,
for
so what's
having relied on the advice of the Attorney General?
Right, so there's already the inherent attorney-client privilege that would come into it when you're dealing with, redactions, exclusions, or, just dealing with the efficiency that it actually comes out. And that was one of the benefits that, I spent a lot of time on the phone talking with the FOIA Advisory Council, talking with the Attorney General's office, talking with a lot of groups about this. And one of the biggest perks that we saw with this is the fact that you would have the ability for the agency in this case to go directly to the Attorney General's office, which is already, supposed to be promoting the state's interest in the first place, as well as promoting, the best interest of our constituents. That's the name of the game, right? And so what they would be able to do is, have that, legal discussion that's, keeps attorney-client privilege, but at the same time, if we wanted to add a transparency clause to this, and I left this out because I think it's more of a discussion point for us to, to leave into it, what we could actually do is ask them to issue a report, not necessarily on the very redactions that they're doing, right, but on the topics that they dealt with each day, the sort of requests that were coming in each day, that would at least be compliant with, the existing FOIA law as it is, making sure that we have that extra level of sunshine so that we know that our government is operating openly and that this group is acting, and that the FOIA Ombudsman is acting as a neutral arbiter as opposed to necessarily just siding with, an agency over a consumer or a consumer over the agency, right? Or I should say the requester versus the agency.
Mr. Chairman, just last question for now. First of all, I want to say I love your enthusiasm, and I really love the fact that you're so well versed in this. I mean,
Thank you
it's
so
really
much.
refreshing to hear the dialogue, and that's what we're all here for. And that's great. One thing we talked about agencies. The SEC is an independent department of state, essentially. Would it also apply for the State Corporation Commission? Because what I'm hearing you say is
So basically, so right now, it says, basically the way we look at it, the definition of city agency does not include county, city, or town, or any local or regional governmental authority. So in that case, the SEC doesn't fall within any of those exclusions. But given that the state government, given that our role within legislatures has to prove the members of the SEC itself, I think you could probably make a case for the SEC there. But honestly, with that, I think that someone from the Attorney General's office or someone else is going to be better equipped to answer that question. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, sorry to belabor the presentation, but I appreciate the dialogue.
Thank you so much.
Delegate Fowler.
So what would happen, say, for instance, if somebody had a FOIA request for the Attorney General?
Sure. So if you have the FOIA request for the Attorney General's office, the first thing that you would do is you would probably go directly into the compliancy office, or you would go to whoever the designated FOIA the FOIA compliancy officer is within that office. I guess Brittany's going to be able to explain that. But what would end up happening is that if you have a dispute with it, if you're not getting the information that you're there to get, that basically the same thing that they have in Maryland right now, whereas if I want information out of Attorney General Peter Franchot's office, that if I were to send them a FOIA, that office, in its capacity acting as a neutral arbiter, would still have to help me out, as opposed to just simply saying, oh no, we're only going to work with the state agency and we're going to throw you to the wind. They have to help me just as much as they're helping the state agency.
All right, and Delegate Davis, you had a question earlier for the Attorney General's office. Did you?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to ask that again?
Yes, please. So the question was, if we adopt this, first off, what is the process by which we would implement this and the provisions everything would go through? Secondly, does the Attorney General's office today have the ability to set this up under the parameters and within the guidelines and funding that you've already got inside your office?
Thank you. I'm Brittany Anderson with the Attorney General's office. So I want to take the second question first, if that's okay. We certainly do not have the parameters or the ability to set this up within our office with our existing funding. We would certainly need to see the budget amendment and the fiscal impact statement submitted for this bill fulfilled. Right now we do, as Delegate Rome mentioned, we do have compliancy counsel in the AG's office, and one of the responsibilities of our compliancy counsel is to fulfill the FOIA request for the Attorney General in our office. That's a rather large workload already, and so I can only imagine that taking on that additional workload for all the state agencies would be a significant more work. So we would certainly need to see that fiscal impact fulfilled. And again, we do have our compliancy counsel. They are set up right now to fulfill the FOIA request for the Attorney General. The attorneys in our office that are the lawyers for our client agencies, state boards and commissions, do play a certain role in assisting the agencies in fulfilling the FOIA request. And so I imagine that if something like this were to be set up within our office, they would play a role in helping the FOIA ombudsman fill this for their clients.
Mr. Chairman, if I may one follow-up.
Delegate Dave.
And I like the concept of this, and I give the delegate a lot of credit for coming through with this. My question is, this request wasn't initiated by the AG's office, and we've never had a request for this by the AG's office in the past. Why is that? Is there really a demand, or if there is, why haven't we seen this type of request in the past?
Oh, this isn't an Attorney General's bill. We don't necessarily have a position on this from the office. Our office fulfills our own FOIA request, and then our counsel is there to assist the client agencies. And if the situation arises that we need to assist them in fulfilling their own FOIA request, and then my understanding is that our client agencies do have FOIA officers who are to fulfill this FOIA request on behalf of their agency. And then, of course, we rely on the FOIA counsel for advice and certain assistance in certain circumstances. So this wasn't a bill that our office brought as a request. I'm just here to answer questions and help out.
Chairman, if I may, one more. So since your office hasn't taken a position and the compliance office is handling it today, would it be safe to assume that the Attorney General's office doesn't see the need right now, since you have not taken a position on helping create this new entity and bring forth this policy change?
I wouldn't necessarily say that we don't see the need. If you all see the need as a policy matter and you feel like the FOIA ombudsman needs to be created as a position, by all means, we really just ask for that funding to be fulfilled. But we do see a little bit of redundancy from the bill, just because of the assistance that our office offers as counsel to our state agencies, and then the work that we do within our office. But again, solely policy matter for you all.
Thank you.
And I guess I actually have a question for, this may be for Alan or someone, as far as this number of requests to state agencies, and most agencies fulfill those requests on their own, and is the juice worth the squeeze if there are not many issues?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I guess is the easiest way to put it. I'm blunt.
Honestly, it's very difficult for me to say, because we answer inquiries about FOIA, but we do not process FOIA requests for others. I know there are agencies like VDOT, Department of General Services, that probably get thousands of FOIA requests per year. There's others who are much smaller, who only get a couple hundred maybe. But it varies depending on the size of the agency and what public interest they have. Most of the agencies do have FOIA officers who process requests, and I know several of them. Some agencies have multiple officers. This would only be for state agencies, but I'm thinking in terms, just for analogy, of localities. If you go to the City of Richmond website and type in FOIA, they have a list of a FOIA officer for every department. If you go to a small town, you look at the FOIA officer, it's one person for the town and every constitutional officer, and sometimes the county as well. All in one, so it really varies depending on the size and actual workload.
Okay. Thank you. All right. We have anyone else to speak for the bill? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Betsy Edwards, and I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Press Association, and I'm here with Bonnie Winston, one of our members. She's the Managing Editor of the Richmond Free Press. We're in support of the bill, and you might say, well, of course you are, you're reporters and journalists, but I'm going to tell you that I'm a former FOIA officer. I was the Public Information Director for the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles for 3.5 years. And prior to that, I was a FOIA officer for the Virginia Department of Transportation. And before that, I was the FOIA officer for the Indiana Public Service Commission. So I spent about 10 years as a FOIA officer. So I'm representing my organization here today, but I'm here to tell you, as a FOIA officer, I would actually welcome this, and I'll tell you why. At DMV, when I worked there as a FOIA officer, I got, as you can imagine, a lot of requests. Almost all of them were from the public. Very seldom were they from, it was probably 80% public, 20% the media. And I had the wherewithal to call my AG representative, the AG assigned to the Department of Motor Vehicles. If I worked in a county, I have the ability to get my county attorney to help me as a FOIA officer. So you brought up a point earlier about the resources that the FOIA officers have. They have resources currently. The people who don't have any resources, don't have any assistance, don't have any help, other than FOIA counsel, which does a phenomenal job, is the public. So if the public goes to an agency ask the FOIA officer for information and can't get that, or don't even know how to ask for it in the right way, the only remedy they have, besides going to the FOIA Council or possibly the Virginia Coalition of Open Government, is to get a lawyer. And the average person obviously can't afford a lawyer to help them with their FOIA request. So I see this as a public advocate. And I see this, whether it's in the AG's office, as Delegate Rome proposes, or somewhere else in state government, as the person who guards the rights of the public in the Commonwealth to get information from state and local government. State and local government FOIA officers, as I just said, have somebody to help them with these requests, but I think it would be great to have somebody on the other side. And if I was a FOIA officer and I had people asking me for crazy things, frankly, it would be helpful if they could go to a public advocate and somebody could mediate that request for me. So I think it benefits the entire Commonwealth, both government employees, you all, and the public and the media. So we're strongly in support of it.
Thank you very much. We need to start moving along, folks. We're third of the way through, so. Delegate Davis. And I know we have one other comment. You can come up if you mind. Something we haven't heard, if you don't mind.
No, I don't have anything new to add, other than we've had many people to come to us from the public, and they've come to our newspaper and said, hey, can you get information on X, Y, or Z? And we try to tell people that the FOIA law covers them too. It's not just for the media. So I think having an ombudsman to help people would really be wonderful for the people of the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. I'm Megan Ryan with the Virginia Coalition for Open Government, and I'm in an incredibly awkward position here because I am thrilled to have someone who has brought this passion and enthusiasm and this kind of idea to the table. I am so thrilled to see such a substantive discussion amongst the subcommittee members. But the downside is that I do not really support this particular bill as it's written. I support the concept. And let me just, if I may, give you a little background on why the FOIA Council was created. It was created in 2000, and I was actually part of the study that created that. At the time, there was the question, it was to be modeled after an office in New York, and at the time, it was a question of where is this office going to be located? Should it be in the executive department like it is in New York? Well, Chip Woodrum was the chair of that committee, and he said, no, I don't want the executive to have that kind of authority over most of these legislative entities. Should it go in the AG's office? The decision was no, because at the time, it still is, citizens do not have a mechanism for asking for opinions on FOIA matters. So if there was a dispute, the statute says only certain people can ask the Attorney General for an opinion. And so we wanted to have a place where the citizen could go for that help. And that's why the FOIA Council was created. And that's what they've been doing for 17 years. And I would love to see this budget amendment and this kind of authority to mediate disputes and to informal mediation, to have more staff, to have more training. I would love to see that money go to the FOIA Council to expand its role. I think that by creating a separate office in another branch of government, we risk causing confusion on the one hand for state agencies who do have FOIA officers, and those FOIA officers are required by statute to be trained annually by the FOIA Council. So you have one statute saying FOIA Council must be doing this for state agency, then you have another FOIA ombudsman that says state agencies get your guidance from us. So I do fear confusion among state agencies, and I fear confusion among the public who don't know, am I supposed to, who's authoritative, who do these opinions that are posted, who do they apply to, and which one takes precedence. So I really want to see some beefed up enforcement and places for citizens to go and get resolution. I'm just not sure that this is the vehicle. With all due respect to the new delegate, I love the idea of what she's trying to do.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Committee? Delegate Davis.
No, I'm wanting to remember what it feeling like the first not long ago, not want to be the first person to kill a new freshman's bill, although I do credit the delegate with an amazing topic to uncover. But given that we're looking to potentially create a department inside of an entity that doesn't think it's needed right now, on top of that, we're going to underfund it, plus the conflict that may be created. For this matter, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we PBI the bill.
We have a motion that's there. A motion properly seconded. Non-debatable? Okay, oh, that's right. I gotta get used to these new rules. 2 minutes. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, I would yield to the patron for 2 minutes.
Okay, last word.
If she'd like to make it.
Thank you so much,
You're very
and thank
welcome.
you as well. To speak to the other chairman's comment earlier about, making sure that the only thing that we have to fear is fear itself. I think that given the existing precedent that we have within the Maryland Attorney General's office, given the fact that, as the letter had indicated, I've shown you here from Rebecca Snyder from the Maryland Delaware District of Columbia Press Association. This is someone I've known Rebecca for a few years. I worked as the news editor up in Montgomery County Sentinel up in Maryland, and they helped craft this in the first place within the Attorney General's office, and it's gotten rave reviews since it's actually been created. You don't have that conflict of basically saying, well, where do I go if I'm a member of the public? Because the FOIA Advisory Council will still exist. It will still be fully functional, and it will still be able to fulfill the job that it's doing, while at the same time, what we also have within the Compliance Office, within the Attorney General's office, given that they already have 2 other core levels of responsibility between counseling contracts, from the outside, as well as managing statements of economic interest, this helps alleviate some of that burden, while at the same time, you also still have those members within that Compliance and Transparency Office able to assist the Ombudsman or to otherwise work with them, as well as fulfill the FOIA request that goes directly to the Attorney General's office. Whereas the Ombudsman creates more of an umbrella dealing with all state agencies, so that all state agencies basically have a one-stop shop. And now keep in mind that if you're a member of the public and you go to that agency, whether it's the DMV, whether it is, anywhere else that you want to go to, and you say, can I have my FOIA, I have a FOIA request for X, and then they don't fulfill it, or they're not giving you the information that you want, whatever it is your problem, and you go to appeal that, basically saying like, hey, how come I still haven't gotten this, and you're not getting the response that you want, then you go to the FOIA Ombudsman and you say, hey, I need some help with this. And at that point, oh yeah, that's 2 minutes. So thank you, please pass this back.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we have a motion properly seconded. Open the roll. All right, cash vote. Oh, sorry. Everyone voted who cared to vote? PBI 5-3. Thank you, Dr. Brown. All right, I know Delegate Cole has someone to do with that Delegate Watts. Yes, sir, Delegate Cole. Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
228.
Yeah, 228. Before we get started, I think I do need to correct something that the committee chairman misstated earlier, and that is that Fredericksburg is actually the place of religious liberty. But anyways, House Bill 228, basically, I want to enable any records that are going to be required to be retained, other than, of course, criminal evidence or things like that, to be able for the locality or the agency to be able to maintain it in an electronic format instead of being forced to maintain paper records. This was something that was brought up at one of my county clerks, where every year she has to basically bind Board of Supervisors resolutions and motions and minutes and maintain paper copies of those. When you get a couple hundred years of Board of Supervisors minutes, and pretty soon you're running out of space. And so instead of having to maintain paper records, and it's not just for local government, but for any agency as well, if you have to maintain a record, let's get into the 21st century and allow electronic copies to be maintained instead of paper copies.
Thank you. Thank you. And questions from committee? I actually have one. As far as access to this media, you actually have to be able to pull that information off within a timely manner if there's a request. So is a requirement to, I guess, at least keep whatever device to.
Well, yeah, once you keep it in a digital format, you can convert, obviously, a digital file from, different formats. Like instead of, you could take a text file and pretty much pull it into any type of word processor you may have. There may be some formatting issues, or even it doesn't have to be that type of digital record. It could be a PDF, or some type of JPEG or something like that, where you just see the picture of it. So I mean, it doesn't specify what format it needs to be kept in, but of course those records would still need to be accessed. And just like now, the paper records may have to be accessed. It'd probably be a lot quicker to do a search on a computer for an electronic file than it would be to go through to some archive, somewhere and try to look up a paper file somewhere.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Delegate Davis?
Thank you. Delegate, so I love the idea of having this electronically. It's easier to sort of just pull it up, in some cases better retention. My question is there anything anywhere that addresses the type of technology that this has to be housed in? And so what I'm talking about is we want to make sure that this isn't, we're going to take all these documents and every month put them on a CD and the CD goes missing, or that it's on a server in maybe one of the city manager's office, and then at that point, something happens to the server, it crashes. Having seen a lot of infrastructure from different counties, cities, and towns, some have access to different infrastructure and newer technology, and I would just be concerned that although the intent is to retain the records for the period of time required, sometimes that technology utilized doesn't really ensure that.
Any threat you can mention a threat to an electronic file, I could mention a threat to a paper file. What if you have water damage and it's no longer readable? What if you have a fire in the space? What if it just gets misplaced and misfiled and lost? So, I mean, there's always a threat that you're going to lose the data, but there's always a threat also that you're going to lose your paper copy as well.
One follow-up, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Well, Delegate Davis.
Given that, and I do agree with you, would the best solution not be to require electronic copy and paper copy, and then once it proves that the electronic copy doesn't have any issues based on the technology utilized, we can eventually get rid of the paper copy?
I think we're at that point now. I mean, we've had word processors for 40 years. We've had electronic data files for longer than that. Let's go ahead and wean ourselves off paper and stop killing trees, and start, like I said, go into the go into the 90s.
Any further questions from the committee? Delegate Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question about security, electronic security, how would it
Well, we've already, a lot of the records are electronic now, and of course, hacking is always a threat, but there's security measures in place now, just like somebody could break into an office and steal the paper records as well. I mean, you're always going to have the threat of somebody stealing information, whether it's a paper or electronic. I mean, in some cases, somebody from China may be able to hack the Spotsylvania County, payroll files or whatever, but when you have physical files, they would have to go to the spot. So in some ways, that's more secure. However, in other ways, you can create firewalls and stuff that may be more secure than somebody breaking a window to go in and steal a file.
Committee, any further questions? Anyone speak for the bill?
Thank you, Megan Ryan with the Coalition for Open Government. I just wanted to actually sort of address Delegate Davis's question, and we're not really taking a position on this, but the Public Records Act that this seeks to amend already does contemplate the archiving of electronic records. And I did speak with the Library of Virginia last week to the records manager analyst there, who seems to think, and your clerk may have a different opinion, they seem to think that they already have this ability to store records in electronic format. Section 42.1-87A actually does say, custodians of archival public records shall keep them in fire-resistant, environmentally controlled, physically secure rooms designed to ensure proper preservation and in such arrangement as to be easily accessible. So that deals with the question that you were asking. And then in that same provision, it does say that the agency should consult with the Library of Virginia to determine the best manner in which to store long-term or archival electronic records. So there is already something in here that does contemplate that archival records could be in electronic form. We don't oppose the bill. I'm just not sure if it is actually necessary.
Well, I can tell you that our local county dealings with the, and I don't have the name of the person they're dealing with at the Library of Virginia, but they will only take our records either in paper form or microfiche. Nobody does microfiche anymore.
So you basically clarified.
Move to report.
Have a motion to report, properly seconded. Any further discussion, board didn't ask that, needed to. All right, open roll. Thank you, Delegate. Thank you. Delegate Bloxham, you are next on here, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee 1341.
Yes, sir. House Bill 1341 is a product of the commission that was sea level rise and recurrent flooding. And what it's trying to do is learn from the lessons that have happened in Florida and even in the Northeast when small businesses failed because they couldn't get money quick enough. What we're trying to do is just create a small bridge loan until FEMA can kick in. These loans are going to range between $1,000 and $5,000. It's basically to help cover payroll, help kick in, cover expenses for a month or two, so FEMA can actually get up and running. There's no budget amendment, no money needed because there hasn't been an emergency yet. We're just trying to learn from what happened in Florida when the businesses closed. After a hurricane or a natural disaster, 25% of small businesses never reopen. And we're hoping that we can get them up and running. The sooner you can get them up and running, the quicker you'll recover and the more chances that they'll survive.
Thank you, sir. All right, members of the committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate.
why isn't there a fiscal impact statement to this? Are you putting money aside?
No, sir. What the plan is, until there's an emergency, there's no money needed. So we don't want to put the money in a fund just to have it sitting there.
So you're just creating a fund?
We're creating a fund and authority in the Small Business Administration, so if it happens, they can move quickly. Otherwise, we'll all be looking at each other saying, why can't we get these businesses open quicker?
Delegate Ballard?
So Delegate Bloxham, disaster declared last time, obviously, federal relief funds, some of that money be put into this?
It might be, it would probably be used to recover it, but all these are loans. These would be
To fund the loan authority?
Yes. There's usually a lag time with FEMA, and that really just hurts the small business from trying to reopen it.
There's no fiscal impact statement on this?
No, sir. There's actually no money set aside for this. This just sets the authority up.
Delegate Davis?
Mr. Chairman, point of clarification, if we're making these loans maximum of 180 days, minimum of 90, if an issue happens, we have an emergency, and loans are given out, assuming we don't cross a fiscal, the June 31st fiscal changeover, would there be a fiscal impact, being that we loan money out, we get it back? I mean, I know in accounting, you basically, there isn't an end of year fiscal impact, but how would we handle that at this stage? I'm not sure if there would be a fiscal impact, because at the end of the year, it's a net zero sum, if I'm not mistaken.
If you don't cross over that date, you are correct. The money, in theory, would be paid back. Yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, anyone here speak in favor of the bill?
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, Nicole Rowley with NFIB. This is something that we brought forward in one of the flooding commission meetings prior to, just knowing that our colleagues in Florida, this has been going on for about 20 years since Hurricane Andrew. It certainly is meant just to be a bridge loan. We are very, very cognizant that this is not meant to save a business that frankly would probably have closed in 6 months, regardless of whether or not they had faced some type of, the emergency, natural disaster. So it's truly meant to help those small businesses that are literally just waiting for their FEMA funds to come in or their insurance payments to come in and pay for a very small thing like one payroll session. So we support the bill. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak either for or against the bill?
Move report. Second.
We have a motion to report, properly seconded. Clerk, the roll, 1341. Brian, Delegate Bloxham, thank you, sir. And having served on the commission with you, thank you for bringing this bill, and hopefully you'll allow me to sign on with you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right. Delegate Plum, got two before us, I believe, today. Oh, there you are, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. With your cooperation, I'll be very brief.
Yeah, you have my cooperation.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, first House Bill 725. This bill was brought to me by a constituent who is a small businessman who does business with the Commonwealth. His concern is that under the definition of small business in the Commonwealth, businesses that are much larger than he is really take away his business. And if you take a look at the definition of how we define small business in relation to having 250 or fewer employees and an average annual gross receipts of $10 million or less, average over the previous 3 years, you can see how otherwise large businesses could sell themselves as being small businesses when in fact they have a substantial amount of business. Now, what I have, after this bill was introduced, the Department of Small Business took a look at the impact of changing the definition as I have done in the proposed bill. They also took a look at the businesses that now qualify. It would impact 746 businesses that currently hold a small business definition, but under this bill would not hold a small business definition. Now, I ran down that list, and I can tell you there were quite a few restaurant addresses on there. So I have, in the best intention, to say to you that while the constituent, I think, has a legitimate problem, this is not the solution. It actually does cause more problems than it creates. But along the way, we're going to have to figure out how to deal with this, because we have a number of people getting excluded by very large businesses selling themselves as small. So with your indulgence, I'd like you to lay it gently on the table.
Thank you, sir. Committee? For a motion?
We strike the bill.
No, we strike the bill.
Well, that seems harsh.
We can make it a soft blow. We strike very soft.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we gently as possible strike the bill.
Thank you, Delegate Fowler. You have a second?
Second.
All right. Cast your vote. All right. Close the roll.
726. Again, I would hope that you would take my request seriously. It deals with small and micro business utilizations in purchases, in state agency purchases. It sets aside for competition small businesses for state agency purchases up to $100,000 for goods and non-professional services, up to $50,000 for professional services, and a set aside for the micro businesses under $10,000. You will recognize that we already do this under an executive order. It was an executive order, I think, first put by Governor Tim Kaine, followed through with Governor Terry McAuliffe. It's quite a big operation. We're talking about 7,285 micro businesses in the Commonwealth. What this essentially does is to codify the actions of a previous governor. And in the best of intentions, when I take a look at what happens in the current administration, I recognize that we want to continue this concept, but maybe the appropriate thing to do would be to allow the administration, working under the previous administration's direction, to bring the bill up to date as they see fit. And so what I would suggest that we do, since I don't think there's any debate about the state promoting small business and micro business utilization and promoting that we carry the bill over. And when we do that, what we do is we allow ourselves to become involved with the administration in making sure that we have a bill that is workable. So that would be my request.
Okay. Committee?
So moved. Move to carry the bill over.
That's actually a voice vote, correct? Voice vote. All right. We have motion properly seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Thank you, Delegate Plum.
Thank you very much, and I want to say very quickly, I've been sitting here for some time listening to your debate, particularly with the new members. I'm so impressed with your attention to their proposals. I'm also doubly impressed with our new members who are here speaking out on complex issues with really good ideas. So my compliments to you for the attention that you've given. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Delegate Mullen, front and center, sir.
Oh my goodness.
Welcome.
That's it. Thank you all very much, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I have HB 213. This would actually empower the FOIA Council to be able to give binding opinions. So the basis of this idea was that, we as lawyers actually just go to the Virginia State Bar when we don't know what to do in an ethical situation, say, come on, you got to help me out here. And if we really need to, we can go and ask an Attorney General's opinion. And then we can actually rely on that. And if we go out and somebody gets angry at us for not doing what they think is right, we can say, oh, I was relying on this Attorney General's opinion. I was relying on the State Bar. And so when I started looking at some of these FOIA Council opinions, which are well thought out, they're extensive, I've noticed you couldn't actually rely on that. So when you don't have reasonable reliance on the opinion of the people who know it best, you end up having to fight the same fights over and over again. So, if you're an agency at, like say a county board, you might have the same person applying and suing you over and over and over again about the same basic types of documents. And that becomes cumbersome and expensive and burdensome for everybody, whether it's the person who's requesting the document or the agency that has to respond. And so if something happens in Bogota, then somebody in RICO should be able to rely on the previous precedent to be able to figure out that we don't have to keep fighting these same battles over and over again. It'll save everybody a little bit of money, it'll save the process a lot of time. And my hope is that this would be the pleasure of the body to be able to move this bill forward. Happy to answer any questions. It doesn't have a fiscal impact, by the way.
That was quick.
Yeah, just wanted to add that one.
Thank you, Delegate Mullen. Do we have any questions from the committee? This time, I actually been doing this. I mean, this is pretty broad change in policy.
It
We're dealing with
certainly is.
immunity and all kinds of things. Is this something that the FOIA Council was ever dealt with? This would be a pretty major change in the function of the active council.
I'm not sure if that's a good sign that they have to think about it.
Mr. Chairman, to the best of my knowledge, no. We have always had advisory opinion, authority, but ultimately advisory, and it hasn't been proposal for.
So this is something that the council's actually discussed on whether or not it's a good idea to actually
Have not
how it wants to
discussed.
these cases are litigated when somebody refuses to provide information. So for example, if the same type of request is being made over and over again throughout the state, you wouldn't have to litigate it in every jurisdiction across the state. Once it's been properly litigated, the FOIA Council has ruled on it, you'd be able to have something that everyone could look to, that'd be available online, and say, this is an opinion that we all have decided is the answer on that. So it wouldn't limit information so much as not have to have the increased cost of litigation.
Any questions from the committee?
Just to, whenever you create a situation in the community, it creates concerns in my mind. I mean, I think people should be held accountable. And as the chair indicated, it's a pretty broadly sweeping change in policy, and I hate to make those types of determinations on the fly without a hearing. And I don't know what the rest of my colleagues feel, how they feel about this, but it'd be my preference that we, the FOIA Council, take a look at this and make a recommendation, and then deal with the bill.
Not the worst idea in the world.
I mean, it would be consistent with how we treated some other
Makes sense.
good bills today.
Mr. Chairman, that process would be having a letter from the chair of the committee at this point. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There he is, right there.
Thumbs up.
Sorry to be giving him too much work.
I guess, any further discussion for or against, or I think the committee is discussing this?
I want to preface my motion with those gentle words. So, having said that, I would make a motion we pass the bill by indefinitely, but whatever the chair would send a letter to the FOIA Council, take a look at it.
Look forward to that discussion.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion to PBI. We have a second? Second, probably seconded. Open the roll. Oh, do you need 2 minutes?
Oh, no, you've heard from me enough.
We got it. All right, everyone voted, care to vote? All right, close the roll. 7-1.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Looking forward to that discussion over
Yes,
this.
sir, thank you. All right, Delegate Robinson, there you are. Now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Robinson should. I have 9 next week. And actually, if I may, I know there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess preference in how to take them up. Would you like to maybe go through 905 through 909 and then come back to 904, or
Yeah.
you want to do 904?
Let's go ahead and do 5 through 9, and then we'll come back to 4. Okay.
Your choice, but thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, committee?
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm wearing my Jim LeMunyon hat today. He was chairman of the FOIA Council, and every one of these bills, Delegate LeMunyon asked me to please bring forward from the FOIA Council. All the bills you see today were passed out of the FOIA Council unanimously. And we'll start with 905. 905, in every one of these bills, if you're familiar with if you read the summary at all, that's pretty much what the bill says. That's the change in the bill on almost every one of these. So I'll be happy to read that to you if you want. But 905, this provides the bidder, offerer, contractor shall not improperly designate as trade secrets, proprietary information, an entire bid proposal or pre-qualification application. Any portion of a bid proposal or pre-qualification application does not contain trade secrets, proprietary information, or line item prices or total bid proposals for pre-qualification application prices. This bill is a recommendation of the Virginia Freedom of Information Advisory Council. Any questions?
Any questions from the committee for the patron? All right, anyone to speak for the bill or from the FOIA Council, or any questions for anyone from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, how does is this a unanimous vote out of the FOIA Council? Is that how the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone to speak for the bill, against the bill? We have a motion to report? No, Delegate Davis, you have a question?
Yes, sir. I was waiting to see if someone was going to speak first, but can the bill properly parsed. And there's just a section of code that refers to whether that needs to be defined as well. But I just want to make sure that it's, that you can still keep some of the pricing proprietary.
That's kind of better for you to.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Delegate, this bill basically codifies language that is already DGS policy from the Department of General Services. And part of the motive for it is over the years we've heard things where public bodies, especially with local bodies, dealing with companies, sometimes companies will stamp every single page of their proposal as confidential, including the final price the taxpayers are paying for a good or service, as well as line items for each good or service within the contract. So this is to make clear they can't do that. At the same time, we have things like, somebody may have a proprietary source where they can get, lumber or I-beams or whatever it is at a better price than their competitors. They don't want to give up that source, so they mark that as a trade secret, but the amount of money that the taxpayer dollars are covering for whatever the final product is, that still has to come out.
Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions? We have a motion properly seconded. Yes, sir.
Point of personal privilege. I know, and just if you will, Mr. Chairman, just by way of example, we sent 2 bills that seem to be good ideas to the FOIA Council. This was an idea that came out last year that we sent to the FOIA Council, and it came back in a very good posture. And so I just want to note that for the, that we're trying to do the right thing there.
Thank you, Delegate.
We never doubted
Mr.
you.
Wise at the point of partial approval.
Okay.
I never doubted you.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. All right. Cast your vote. All right, let's roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
8-0, so 906.
So now we're going to do 906. So 906 is very short, and the language change in the bill, it's really kind of all in line 15 and 16 on a PDF. And what it does, it clarifies the definition of electronic communication in the Virginia Freedom of Information Act by amending it to mean the use of technology having electrical, digital, magnetic, wireless, optical, electromagnetic, and similar capabilities to transmit or receive information. And again, this came out of the council unanimously.
Any questions, or where did it come up with this definition? Was that somewhere else in the code? I mean, I can see where the old definition was archaic, but out of date. But
If I may, Mr. Chair, the definition for electronic does come from other sections of the code, and then for the transmit or receive information, this came out of the dictionary.
That's right. All right, anyone to speak for the bill, against the bill? Have a motion properly seconded. No members? Cast your vote. Okay, voted. 906 passes 8-0. Delegate Robinson.
Thank you.
On we go.
House Bill 907, and what 907 does, it consolidates the existing provisions concerning public meetings conducted by electronic communication means. And the bill contains a lot of technical amendments. And if you look at the bill, the technical amendments actually go back to the bill we just passed and using that new term for the electronic communications, is where that kind of gets used throughout, is for technical. But the biggest section of that bill, there's a large section, it's a new code section, 2.23.18.House, entitled Meetings Held Through Electronic Communication Means. It begins on line 196 and goes through line 309. And it's divided into sections, and I'm not going to go through each individual section, but it's related to each section. One's related to public bodies, one's related to regional public bodies, and the other is related to state public bodies. And again, this came out of the FOIA Council unanimously. If you have questions about each section, we'll be happy to address those as well.
Thank you, Delegate Robinson. Can you give us a scenario, an example of walking us through a meeting and how this opposed to how we're structured now and what it would look like in the future.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, currently there are two sections that deal with electronic meetings. There's a long legislative history, goes back to pilot programs from decades ago. And basically, one of these things was for state level public bodies. It has one provision for emergencies declared by the governor. The other one is usable by anybody, but particularly it's for individual members who you've got a regular meeting scheduled, but then something comes up and they can't make it, or they have a medical situation, whatever the reason is, and they call in. People get very confused because it's two separate procedures that almost always end up somebody's on a speakerphone, or they might have Skype or FaceTime or some other audio visual means, but they end up in the same place with somebody calling into a meeting, but they get there in two very different ways, and they're distinguished based on whether it's a state body, whether it's a governor declared emergency, whether you're calling in based on a personal matter, whether it's a medical reason, or whether you are a member of a regional body who lives 60 miles or more away from the central meeting location. And they have, again, there's certain policy requirements, there's reporting requirements, there's quorum requirements, there's exceptions. It gets very complicated, but in practice it ends up with somebody on the speakerphone, almost always.
All right. Any questions from the committee? Anyone speak for the bill or against the bill? And a motion to report properly seconded. That was cast your vote on 907. All right, Delegate Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now we're going to House Bill 908, and it's meetings held by electronic communication means, and it removes the Freedom of Information Act requirement that the remote locations from which members of a public body participate in meetings through electronic communication means open to the public. Instead, members of the public must be provided an electronic communication means substantially equivalent to that provided to the members of the public body to which the public may witness the meeting. The bill provides that public access to remote locations from which members of the public body participate through electronic communication means shall be encouraged but not required. However, if 3 or more members are gathered at the same remote location, such remote location must be open to the public. The bill also amends the annual reporting requirements for public bodies that meet by electronic communication means, and again, came out of the council unanimously.
Members of the committee, any questions? I guess once again, can you kind of walk us through in today's world versus the future?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This one was actually part of the program that's for state level public bodies, and one of the procedural requirements is that when somebody calls in, they call in from a remote location that's open to the public. Historically, the idea, this is before cell phones, so not everybody had a phone with them. It's the idea they'd go to a community center, a community college, a library, somewhere that already had some sort of connectivity built in. They could open up a meeting room, let the public in, and call in that way. Over the years, everybody's got a cell phone now. People call in from home, call in from their office, call in from a public park, almost anywhere. And so just the technology has changed over time, and this kind of recognizes that people are calling in from a lot of locations that really don't need to be open to the public, such as your home or your private office, something like that. But in order to ensure that people can still see what's going on, we have the requirement that we offer them substantially equivalent means for the public to observe if you're using electronic means for a member to participate. The part about 3 or more members, that goes back to the definition of a meeting, where if you have 3 or more members gathered together discussing public business, it is considered a meeting. And the concern is for a larger body, they may have 3 or more in a remote location together, and it's not the central location where you may have 3 or 4, and they could effectively almost have a quorum at the remote location, so you want that to be open to the public if they do that. Otherwise, it's kind of like a secret meeting within the meeting. So to avoid that, it has to be open still. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Anyone to speak to? Delegate Davis.
Just want to make a quick comment. I really want to thank the delegate because last year I had to phone in for a commission meeting. I had to declare my RV open to public use so I could dial in. So thank you very much.
But you had that old-fashioned voter salad. Motion to record properly seconded.
questions, and let me step aside and have Mr. Gerhardt explain these, because he has the history by being on council, so thank you very much. All right, so House Bill 909 is disclosure of law enforcement and criminal records. It clarifies that the discretionary exemptions contained in the Freedom of Information Act pertaining to law enforcement and criminal records may be used by any public body. Current law only permits such exemptions to be used by public bodies engaged in criminal law enforcement activities. The bill also restricts the application of the discretionary exemption for those portions of non-criminal incident or other non-criminal investigative reports or materials that contain identifying information of a personal, medical, or financial nature, the release of which would jeopardize the safety or privacy of any person, to only those portions of non-criminal incident or other non-criminal investigative reports or materials that are in the possession of public bodies, engaged in emergency medical services, engaged in fire protection services, or engaged in criminal law enforcement activities, or engaged in processing calls for service or other communications to an emergency 911 system or any other equivalent reporting system. Again, this came out unanimously from the FOIA Council.
Members of the committee, any questions?
Maybe a question for the representative for the FOIA Council. Why are we limited just to felonies and not include misdemeanors?
For the first part on criminal incident information, I'll tell you, Warren Carmichael, who was the Fairfax PIO for I think 30 years or so, and has since retired, he always said it was because of the sheer volume of misdemeanors that it would just be too much stuff to report.
Any further questions from the committee? Anyone to speak for the bill or against the bill? Have a motion to report? Properly second. All right, members, cast your vote. Anyone care to vote? Have everyone close the roll. 7-0.
So we don't have House Bill 1101 on this agenda today, right?
No.
Okay. So now we'll go back to 904. So 904 also came out of the FOIA Council without any unanimous vote. And since then it's caught a little heat, so I want to tell you what it does, we'll talk about it, and then we'll go from there. Creates a general record exclusion for trade secrets submitted to a public body. The bill provides that a record is eligible for exclusion as a trade secret if the submitted information qualifies as a trade secret of the submitting entity as defined in the Uniform Trade Secrets Act, and requires the submitting entity to make a written request to the public body invoking such inclusion upon submission of the trade secret information for which protection from disclosure is sought, identifying with specificity the trade secret information for which protection is sought, and stating the reason why protection is necessary. The bill permits a requester filing a FOIA petition challenging a record's designation as an excluded trade secret to name the submitting entity or successor in interest, in addition to the public body as a defendant. The bill also permits the public body to request that the court add the submitting entity as an additional defendant in the action. The bill provides that the general exclusion for trade secrets shall not be construed to authorize the withholding of such information that no longer meets the definition of a trade secret under the Uniform Trade Secrets Act. And this bill is a recommendation, again, of the FOIA Council, which came out unanimously. And I would like our FOIA representative to give you some history and how it was established.
I'd like to actually go to the committee, hear from Alan before any questions, to shed some light on sorry, sitting back.
Thanks, sir. This was something. This was a bill that came about after about 4 years of study. As many of you know, we had House Resolution number 96 from 2014, which was Delegate Lemunion's setting up a 3-year study of all FOIA exclusions that we've got. And so we did that. We concluded that in 2016. We had omnibus legislation last year in 2017. One of the things we did not do was propose any changes to the trade secrets and proprietary records section. We had a number of bills that were studied, as well as just the topic generally. We heard testimony from state agencies and others affected by various proposals. In 2014, the Virginia Press Association submitted a white paper regarding the study, and it had a bunch of different ideas, one of which was a proposal to create one or more general exemptions for trade secrets. It identified some different types of trade secrets, such as trade secrets submitted by by a private entity to a public body, as well as trade secrets generated by a public body for its own use, financial information, different categories. Over the course of the study, I forget how many bills and different amendments and variations we had on it, but they were numerous. The Press Association submitted a second white paper in 2016, again expanding on the idea with some suggested language. They didn't reach a conclusion in the 3-year study, so no proposal was made for change at that time, but we carried over the topic and studied again last year. In all, I believe we've had over 30 meetings addressing trade secrets and proprietary records. This was the result of that in part. The procurement part was part of it. There were various suggestions regarding the use of the term proprietary because of the way it's been interpreted by the Virginia Supreme Court, and that is an issue that we had proposals. They couldn't reach agreement on that, so there's no proposal for change in that respect. This is meant to address one aspect, and that is trade secrets submitted by a private entity to the public body and the way we're going to address those. Currently, if you look in 2.2-3705.6, which is our trade secrets and proprietary records section, you'll see if you look over time that it's a Christmas tree. They're adding ornaments every year with new bills to cover new things. If you recall, when I was here last week, I talked about the structure of FOIA, and one of the things we've done over the years is to create exemptions that are specific as to the type of record as well as the agency, and that section is a good example of that. The problem is more and more agencies are holding or receiving trade secrets, and so they're asking for new exemptions every year. I think we're close to 30. I don't know. I know there's at least one bill that's been proposed this year that would add to it. There seems to be 1 or 2 just about every year. So I think part of the Press Association's concept that's important here is that they wanted to stop that proliferation and make it simpler because people were looking at it going, I don't know which is which. This is hard to understand. And each of them uses very similar language in that the vast majority say trade secrets are defined in the Uniform Trade Secrets Act, but not all of them do that. Some of them just say trade secrets. Some of them say trade secrets and confidential information. Some say trade secrets and proprietary. And so there's a little bit of confusion about, what do these differences actually mean? And there's concern about how a court might interpret them differently. So in order to address that, they proposed this general concept of we want to get the one general exemption everybody can use, and then remove the language that's specific for each agency. So it's kind of a sea change shift in FOIA in how we want to address the concept in more of a broad fashion rather than specific. That's where it came from.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, I should mention, if you look at line 654 through line 658 of the bill, this is an important provision because it allows joinder of the submitting entity. Currently, if there's a challenge on any of these, most of them require the entity to mark what's to be protected and state why it's to be protected, but they don't necessarily give the public body a chance to go back and say, yes, we will protect it, or no, we won't. Some of them do allow that, some of them don't allow that. This would allow that if a public body is challenged when they use the exemption for trade secrets, that they can also join the entity that submitted the trade secret and made the designation. Because otherwise you have the public body's attorneys trying to defend something that was designated by somebody else. Be happy to answer any other questions.
It's 4 years you've been working on this.
4 years.
4 years. That's correct. Okay. Members of the committee, any questions? Well, let's get some comment here. Members of the public, speak for the bill. All right. Anyone speak in opposition to the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. My name is Emily Francis. I'm with the Southern Environmental Law Center. And I definitely, from speaking with the delegate about this bill, I definitely understand the intent and the intention of what is trying to be done here. And unfortunately, We are opposed to the bill. We believe that there are significant unintended consequences. What the bill does, as Mr. Gerhardt said, it's a sea change. It creates a sweeping, broad exemption for trade secrets. As of right now, there are 17 exemptions in that section of the code. This would allow unlimited trade secret exemptions from FOIA. And the particular detail that we have concerns about, there was a robust discussion last year about the public's access to chemical information from chemicals that are used during the hydraulic fracturing process. Citizens in the Taylorsville Basin and other parts of the state are very concerned about chemicals that are being put in the ground and used during this process. The public would like access to this information. As of today, they do have access to that information, and we'd like that to stay the same. We'd like them to have access to that information. They would like access to this information. And so again, it was not part of the discussion as this bill was being drafted. We understand it's an unintended consequence of the bill, but we do believe that it is significant enough for your consideration. Again, the Southern Environmental Law Center opposes the bill, and we prefer that citizens have access to this information. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Corinna Bell, and I represent the Sierra Club Virginia chapter. I share the concerns of my colleague about unintended consequences for the bill, understanding that this was not an intended consequence, but we share those concerns just shared with you.
Hi, Daria Christian with Friends of the Rappahannock. Also agree with Ms. Francis. Friends of the Rappahannock also opposes this bill. It would put the health and safety of many of Northern and Middle Peninsula residents at risk. So we also oppose. Thank you.
Megan Ryan, Coalition for Open Government. Hello. I was in the ABC committee apparently. And we do somewhere. Yeah, we oppose the bill for the same reasons and do want to point out that yes, it has been worked on for 4 years, and the bill that came, nobody was really happy with it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, with your permission, I'm not opposing the bill. I represent the Virginia Oil and Gas Association. My name is David Clark, and I just wanted to state for the committee that I don't think it's appropriate to single out a particular trade secret. A trade secret is a trade secret and should be treated equally regardless of the source of that information. And we don't have a particular position on this bill, but I would encourage you, if you're going to pass something, do not carve out specific trade secrets, trade secret information for particular industries. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess, Delegate Robinson, when we're talking trade secrets, I mean, sometimes, as the gentleman just referred to, trade secret's a trade secret is trade secret, but sometimes we might not like the policies, we want access to those trade secrets. So is that?
Well, my suggestion is they've worked on it for 4 years, and we knew it was kind of broad sweeping, and when this was brought to my attention the other day by Ms. Francis, that it was never intended to be a hidden secret, okay? And even though I carried that bill last year, it was never brought up in discussion in any of their meetings, and no one ever came forward with those concerns. So just to say that it's not a backdoor approach to get those trade secrets in place. But what I would like to see it do rather than the bill just go down in flames, and because there's been a lot of time spent on this particular issue, is to give the FOIA Council another shot at cleaning this up and trying to figure out a better way so that it does make it easier for the citizens to find, to deal with the trade secret issues. So that's where I'd like to see the bill go, if that is the committee's wish.
Committee, any discussion?
Question for Delegate Robinson there. So what are you asking us to do with this bill?
They send it back to the FOIA Council.
So you don't, You're gonna wanna report it out?
I would love to report it out. It would, I mean, I'd like to see the bill get moved forward and we can consider maybe working on it, but, it's a good bill. It's got some protections in there, and so, yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I'd like to see it reported out, but if it does fail, I would like to see it go to the FOIA Council.
Yeah, and if I may, this is a policy that the FOIA Council has worked on for 4 years.
Yes, it
And
is.
been properly vetted, you've had the experts looking at it, and if this committee wishes to move it forward, then maybe your best interest in.
Well, then let's go for the vote.
The Commonwealth's interest to move it forward and shut it.
Mr. Chairman, I remember this debate last year, and one of the things I recall was, we wanted to send it to FOIA Council to vet it, but the other thing I recall was that, the entities that use the trade secrets to extract, gas and oil have to comply with other EPA and environmental regulations. And so there are some safeguards to the public. I guess the concern, I don't mean to put words in people's mouth, is there's no trust but verify. I guess their feeling is that the verifications be able to FOIA these records. But I believe that if you had an AG that were concerned, he found a way to make sure that the environment would not be damaged. So I'm prepared to renew my motion to report the bill. Proper time.
Issue before, something was put in the FOIA Council, with PBI and then sent to the FOIA Council. So what is the difference?
This has been at the FOIA Council that's worked on this for 4 years.
But you
And this
say-
is the result of
but
the
you say
work.
it's going back to.
Oh, no, his motion is to report. His motion is to report the bill. Do we have a second? Motion properly seconded to report? Open the roll? Sorry, that's used. All right, if everyone care to vote, care to vote. The bill report's 5-3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members.
Thank you,
We
Dr.
will see you in full committee. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Delegate Davis, committee members, we have some, it's gonna showboat out there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So everyone here has seen House Bill 375 a couple of times?
I have not seen it in committee, but I did see the governor vetoed it.
Yes, yes. But then before he was governor, we're thinking he's elevated to new wisdom now.
Okay, let's go with that.
Mr. Chairman, this bill is known as kind of the wage floor bill. What this does is it prevents localities from mandating higher wages and higher benefits be paid to employees of a company to be awarded a local government contract. Essentially, it stops Davis-Bacon, local government Davis-Bacon scenarios where they can tell businesses what they have to pay their employees in order to get a local government contract, sir. It's been in front of this committee, I think a couple of times, not this exact one, and it's been asked to be reintroduced by the chamber and other entities as well.
Thank you, Delegate Davis. Any questions from the committee?
I have one.
Delegate Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, why are you telling Arlington County, my jurisdiction, what we should be paying
Sure.
contractors? Why should the General Assembly be saying that? We just passed a bill earlier today about trying to expand a right for rural areas that urban areas don't have. Because urban areas are different than rural areas, and in my neck of the woods, you're gonna have to pay a certain rate in order to get the good quality contract. So why should the General Assembly tell my jurisdiction that are struggling to meet these demands that they can't pay a living wage?
Well, so I would answer that two ways. The first way is I would say that local government doesn't tell businesses what they initially have to pay. They put out the bid, and you don't have to tell businesses what you're willing to pay. Business will tell you what they're willing to do it for. So my guess is Arlington doesn't have a shortage of businesses. There may be a wage to get a project done that is higher than a wage to get the project done, let's say in Virginia Beach, but Arlington businesses will tell you what that going wage is when they bid on the RFP. The reason why it impacts us here in Richmond is, and I saw this numerous times on local government in Virginia Beach, a lot of projects have a state cost share. And the cost share is based as a proportion of the overall cost of the project. So let's say there's a $100 million project in your neck of the woods or my neck of the woods, and there's a 25% cost share from the Commonwealth. That's $25 million, whereas if it actually had only been $80 million, the cost share would have only been $20 million. So it actually impacts our coffers here, and therefore impacts other localities across the Commonwealth that honestly could have had more help had other localities not artificially raised wages for projects.
Is this the exact same bill that was filed last year?
It is identical, and I will mention also that in reflection, I even kept the same exemption specifically for the city of Alexandria, Arlington, and Charlottesville, based on some contracts they already have in place.
What line is that?
It starts in line 20, sir. It doesn't mention in my name, but the language came from those three localities when I first introduced this bill.
Any further questions from the committee? We need to get some comment. Anyone speak for the bill? Against the bill?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Matt Yonka, President of Virginia State Building Trades. The Virginia State Building Trades feels that the House Bill 375 removes decision-making power from the localities and the officials to the detriment of the workers and working standards meant to protect them. This bill is a one-size-fits-all approach that removes flexibility from local government in generating economic growth for their community and addressing local needs. Local government is better suited to address issues relevant to their citizenry than representatives in Richmond. Local government is more accessible and more accountable, and local leaders should not be blocked from acting in the best interest of their communities. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Excuse me. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I'm David Conmey. I'm the Local Government Policy Administrator for the Commission on Local Government, which is housed within the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development. We oppose this bill with similar sentiment to the gentleman who just testified before you. We feel that local governments should have this local autonomy preserved for the 95 counties, 38 cities, and 190 towns in the Commonwealth, each allowing them their own distinct standard rather than one standard, one universal standard across the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just say I appreciate the comments. NFIB has always supported this, the Chamber has always supported this, and if the localities would like to forego any future cost shares by the Commonwealth of Virginia, I'd be willing to reconsider the bill.
Members of the committee? I don't need a motion. We have a motion report properly seconded. Further discussion? Clerk, go through the roll.
Thank you, sir.
Doug Davis? 5-3. Best for last. Got a lot of fish to go there. All right, House Bill 62. Yes, I will take it away from here, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 62 came to me at the request of Caroline County. They had their private life
Campbell approached me and Smith County wanted to be included into this. Now again, both Caroline County and Smith County Boards of Supervisors have passed resolutions supporting this change. And so again, I would obviously entertain any questions if there are any.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt the amendment.
Our motion to adopt the amendment. Second, to adopt the amendment. Second. All those in favor of adopting the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And then the bill's before us. Delegate Bell.
Again, these are actually cost-saving measures, particularly the one in Smith County, by incorporate with the local government, they were able to get some economies of scale, and again, to save a significant amount of money for Smith County. Again, in the Caroline situation, their library incorporated is having a hard time keeping up. And so they just requested that they no longer wanted to have that responsibility. Requested that Caroline take over that operation, which they agreed to do. Again, I just hope it will be the pleasure of the committee to report to it.
All right. Any questions from anyone? For the bill, against the bill? Who's against the library? All right, motion. Yep.
Just interestingly enough, we've gotten some emails from Smith County people who are opposed to this because they like the library and they don't want the county control. Seems like they have a incorporated library run volunteer board of directors. And so just bring it up that we received that. I guess.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Campbell made me aware of that. He said it was kind of the same handful of people that didn't like this issue in the first place. And again, on the Board of Supervisors who represents those folks, as well as the other people, residents, citizens of Smith County, said, hey, this is what's best for Smith County.
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that the actual Board of Supervisors took action to request this change.
So that was my question. So, have a motion to report. Second. Properly seconded.